You watching Newsfeed AM. Let's pick up on this conversation around Operation Dudula. The leader of that operation, Nhlanhla Lux Muhlauli, will today apply for bail after spending the weekend behind bars. He was arrested by police and for acting on a case, or who were acting on a case that was opened by a Soweto resident, Victor Ramirafe, whom you've heard much about this morning. And the home of this individual was allegedly ransacked by Operation Dudula members, the group claiming that it was acting on tip-offs from the community that drugs were allegedly being sold from Ramirafe's home. Well, social scientist and author Dr. Ebrahim Harvey joining us this morning. He says there will be very serious consequences if Dudula replaces the police's anti-criminal work, especially in townships. Let's speak to Dr. Harvey now. Dr. Harvey, thank you very much for your time. So many issues to explore stemming from your piece, whose heading read, and I'm going to have it in a moment here if this thing allows, but basically the sum total of your argument is that we are all immigrants, or we are all migrants. Let's start off with what you are warning about to be the failures of government, in particular the police, and that is around dealing decisively with xenophobia, which first reared its head back in May of 2008.
Yeah, well, there's a whole history to this, subsequent, in fact, I argued in the article that if you look at the ANC government after 2008, I mean, it was the first explosion of xenophobic violence in 2008. What did the ANC government do since then? That is the problem. That's the big problem. Now, when you talk about law enforcement agencies and the police, the one aspect I did not go into much or mention really, which is very institutionally very important, is the Department of Home Affairs. The police and the Home Affairs Department. And we've seen there's been lots of stories of corruption in the police, including in Home Affairs, where people have been documented, they've been bribed, etc. And you've got to locate this whole thing of the emergence of Dudula. And then in Alexander Township, Operation Dudula last year, late they formed. It's an expression of an utter desperation of people, both foreign nationals and South Africans. This is the worst unemployment crisis in the history of South Africa. COVID-19 and then the Russian invasion of Ukraine has devastated the ranks of we in the worst situation ever. That is the root cause of the emergence of the Dudula movement. Yeah. It's very important to understand this. But there's one big problem that the Dudula movement has, which I must comment on. This thing, and I've seen it on TV again this morning, and in fact, that's how this Lux was arrested. This thing that this guy is a drug peddler, and they link foreign nationals to drugs, etc., is nonsense. There's a lot of South African black people. Unemployment drives people into many things to just secure some income to live, literally, stay alive. So the linking of drugs to the foreign nationals is false. It happens to some extent, but I can tell you now, and research will confirm it. There are a lot of South Africans who are black and unemployed who are in the drug trade. So, but there's an important thing to be said here. I am hoping that the Operation Dudula movement, and there's a background to that. Malema mustn't try to plead innocent here. Malema and the Patriotic Alliance went around to stores and restaurants.
Dr. Harvey, I can hear that you're going into the areas that I want us to touch on a little later. So let me try and focus the attention first.
All right, no problem.
On the department that you say you actually overlooked in your piece. You didn't quite center your argument strongly around there as well, and that is Home Affairs. Its minister has been up and about talking to media personnel, also dealing with what he says are corrupt elements within his department. At the center of this, Dr. Harvey, as you correctly put it, it is the Department of Home Affairs and the corrupt elements in that department that have allowed for undocumented foreign nationals in many instances to come into the country corruptly because they have been taking bribes. And it takes us back to the conversation that is always had about corruption is not a victimless crime. Is this perhaps one of the largest expressions of that, that corruption actually is a crime that has many victims?
Obviously, it has many victims, but the important thing about the whole narrative of corruption is there's a corruptor and a corruptee in all instances of corruption. And, I don't want to be opportunistic, but I mean, the question of corruption, you just need to look at the Zono Commission of Pride, the State Special Investigation Unit. This country is drowning in corruption. So I'm happy that the minister has conceded that there's been corruption in the ranks, but not just Home Affairs. Home Affairs on its own institutionally can't do much. It does a lot of damage or corruption there. But it's linked to corruption in the police. I mean, the police has to enforce the relevant laws and legislation, So that is where, but the best efforts and initiative of government to stem this tide of xenophobia that's gripped this country, you've got to look at it historically, has to finally, settle with the question of what as the government did all it could. This is coming a long time, 2008, you're talking 14, 15 years, man. I really think that amongst many problems the ANC has faced, it has not resolved to deal effectively and efficiently with this problem. This doesn't come from nowhere. This
Dr.
comes
Harvey.
from the economic crisis in South Africa ever, of which unemployment, close to 50% unemployment rate, the highest unemployment rate in the entire history of South Africa.
Dr. Harvey, in your piece, you focus the attention, rightly so, on the police's failure to deal with this issue. Yes, there are many other processes that lead to foreign migrants, illegal migrants coming into the country, but they then become that ultimate body that stands between those that may want to fight each other. Xenophobia is the problem that we are possibly looking at here, Dr. Harvey, and you talk about xenophobia in your piece. There is a problem. There has been an observation that with Operation Dudula going around and doing what it has been doing, who has been accompanying them, by the way? It is the very same police officials who have now conveniently turned on the leader of that movement and arrested, put handcuffs in him, as if they were not there when he was conducting these operations. Do police have any credibility left?
Absolutely, they were there. And let me tell you something. I don't know if you listened to the lawyer representing Lux. I like to call him Lux. Yesterday and this morning. It's trumped up charges. It's rubbish. They're going to throw it out. It has no legs to stand on. The police were there. The guy whose home was apparently invaded was there, etc. It's going to be completely thrown out. And, the fact that the police were present, we have a very serious situation. You could see there was something that could have happened late last week between the EFF supporters and Operation Dudula. And were the cops not there, we would have had a bloody confrontation. So there's lots involved in dealing with this Operation Dudula. You can't blame those people. Even if they're situating this thing within South Africa first, etc. Those people are desperate, and there's no doubt that the corporate companies have not been blamed. Cheap labor lies at the bottom of this whole thing. They are right to some extent. The South Africans will say that, the employers are giving preference to the illegal migrants, because there's no doubt that it's a global phenomenon of xenophobia. And the question of stamping down on illegal migrant labor is that it's cheap labor. And when you've got an economic crisis like we have unprecedented, employers go to secure the cheapest labor, and there's no doubt that the most desperate people, because they come from Zimbabwe, etc., where everything is falling apart, are these migrants.
So, Dr. Harvey, how do we hold the business community accountable as well? Because, as you say, they are partly responsible for fanning the flames.
They're not partly, they're largely responsible. You've got to take it to NEDLAC. NEDLAC is the institutional framework where the unions are represented, government and employers, that has to deal with this. And I don't think NEDLAC has given this thing, I hope now with what's happening now. I mean, there's serious, look at Bredasdorp. Look what's happened to hundreds of people. They're thrown out of their homes. It was on TV yesterday. It's terrible what's happening in Zwelica and Bredasdorp. And where next is it going to explode? But business, I believe, has not received adequate attention as a culprit in this whole thing. Because there's no doubt. They tend to want to employ. Foreign labor would have less knowledge of their rights, etc. And it's the cheapest labor. Globally, that is the situation. Employers go to secure labor from where they would pay the least.
Final element, Dr. Harvey, I want to deal with is that of political leaders. And you have mentioned in your piece Julius Malema, who we understand this morning might give a comment or two around Operation Dudula. Gayton McKenzie from the Patriotic Alliance, you are saying that they should not conveniently forget that it is them who were also aggressively doing this whole issue of the focus around, or who were driving the anti-migrant sentiment, if you like. What kind of responsibility should they take for what is going on right now?
Huge responsibility, without a shadow of doubt. That is how I would answer that assertively. Go and look at when Operation Dudula really took to the streets and became this big problem that we're sitting with now. And go look when Malema, McKenzie of the Patriotic Alliance, when they went around. Basically those were threats and they were unlawful. The Minister of Labour said they had no right. You have got no right to go to any store to go demand that ratio of local to foreign employment, etc. This is what they did. I think, Malema and the EFF, although he retreated a day or two after what had happened and, tried to play down the whole thing. But who knows? I think research will show, if you speak to Dudula supporters, I think you will find that a lot of them were encouraged by what Malema and them did, not long ago. You can't separate these issues, It's a very dynamic situation,
So what should Malema be saying this morning, Prof? Very briefly, I'm out of time. As I said, he is expected to say something around Operation Dudula. What should Julius Malema be saying this morning?
Well, you know what? I mean, if you look at the rank and file of the EFF, unemployment is the highest amongst the black youth. They should be talking to each other. Malema and the EFF and Dudula should sit down and talk, because I think they need to combine their efforts and energies to deal with this problem, and not to be point scoring and all that's happening at the moment. There's a vicious fight between the EFF leadership and the leaders and followers of Operation Dudula. If you don't address that, you're going to have a lot of bloody explosions on our streets, really. They need to sit together and deal and thrash these issues out.
Dr. Ebrahim Harvey, thank you very much for your time. He is an author and indeed someone very, very influential in terms of the opinion that he often so gives through opinion pieces as he did. Thank you very much for your time.